Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We're going to dim the lights a little bit, and we handed out some agendas, and unfortunately Kelly and Donna could not be here today. They have been singing for us, and they have mountain dulcimer that I just cannot describe how good it sounds, the music they play, and what it adds to what we do. So we're got a little bit of extra time, so even though we're a little bit behind because of some things we're setting up, we're still good. So right now what I'm going to do a little presentation, and I'm going to take you up to speed, so it doesn't matter if you've been here before. I've got new things on here, and there's some things we always need to cover and tell people, like what happened at the tree, and what took place, and where we're at now, and what we're going, and what's been accomplished, and things that we've discovered. We've always got new things that we have that we're adding to this. And so, do you want me to use the microphone, or do you rather me not use it? What does everybody like best? Use it. Use it? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we'll see if we can make this work, and I hope me and AJ loaded the right program on here. Okay. Okay, so this, where's the pointer at on this, AJ? On the very top, you just push that, and then to advance left and right. Okay, so this stump you see right here is from Oregon County, Missouri, and a little bit later on, Lynette's going to tell us a little bit about the trees down there. But this is just kind of a classic example. The more we do this, we find out the range of these trees was much, much larger. And we've put together a program this afternoon for you that's going to cover a little bit of that. And if you're from Texas and you have Ozark Chinquapins, would you raise your hand if anybody's in the room that has them? A little bit higher, Terrence, back in the back, okay? If you're from Alabama and you have Ozark Chinquapins in your state, would you raise your hand? Okay, over here. Is there anybody that grew up in Louisiana that remembers Chinquapins in Louisiana? There we go, okay. And we had a guy from Virginia that came real close to coming here that does champion trees. He would have raised the hand up too. So we keep finding more and more information about these trees and how large the range was. And so when I first started doing this, I had kind of an interesting thing. The gentleman that would have been 100 next month, his name is Harold Adams. And he was a person that I would meet when I'd go camping. And all of us here, this is kind of a different message I want you to take away from this meeting. And it's not about all the research that we've done. It's not about all the hard work we put in. I want all you to think about how you personally influence people around you and the environment. I don't think any of us fully appreciate how much we impact the people around us or the world around us, good or bad. And so that's me with my son, and he's 17 years old now. And as you can see, I'm a little bit older. But when growing up, though, I grew up, we had a shack on the Current River, which this is a backwater of it. This is Kids Fishing Day where I work at. And so growing up, I had a garden, and that's what I was made to do when I was younger. Then later on, I liked it. And so just growing up and doing that kind of thing. This is a place right here by the U.S. Forestry office in Poplar Bluff. They were going to pave this in. And so me and my family adopted it, and we planted flowers there, and it's still grass today. You can tell it's a long time ago. Gas is $1.14, so you can tell it's been a while back. But I want everybody to understand, and by the way, Sam is here today, and Leslie's doing a presentation later on for us. And so it just goes to show the impact we have on the world around us. And my good friend Matthew, raise up your hand, where's he at? Matthew said something years ago, and he and I both grew up in the Boot Hill. And he said, we've taken this place that has some of the largest trees in the state of Missouri. We cleared them off and made farmland out of it and made a desert out of this place. And he's exactly right. But this is one of the prettier pictures. But I think, though, when you grow up in a place like this, where you have muddy ditches and farmland, almost no trees, into the contrast of going up in the hills like we have around us, you have clear springs and cool green shade places. It really gets your attention, and it gives you a good perspective with that diversity about what's really important. And so when up where we had us a shack at on the Current River, this gentleman I would talk to, who just recently passed away, would tell me about this tree, and the nuts on them, he said, were so important that it was just incredible. They were so dependable. They were more dependable than a crop of corn, and they were good to eat. He said they were excellent, and just like Al said, people would collect them, and they'd use them for food for livestock. The same kind of thing that we would hear, and is anybody here from New York? Raise your hand. Okay. The same thing that we hear about the American chestnut, the same kind of thing. And so what we're doing bringing this tree back is a diversity in our forest that not just people, we look at it so much about what we have a benefit on. But if you were to talk to the bears, the deer, the turkeys, even the neotropical birds that eat the insects off these trees, they would tell a different story. But this guy would tell me every year about this tree, and this was back in the 80s, and I thought, he's talking about the American chestnut. And then the more I began to look and check, I thought, well, wait a minute, did he grow up in Tennessee, or did he grow up in Missouri or Arkansas? Well, he grew up in the Ozarks. And so every year we'd go up there hunting, fishing, camping. I got to know him a little bit better. He would camp out the whole month of October. And so I began to be a little bit fascinated about this. And he told me, now the trees are all gone, no one's ever heard of them. Well, that's what fascinated me about it. And for those who don't know, in the month of July, National Geographic magazine sent a reporter down to him and a photographer, and they got his story. And if you just go online, Google, type in National Geographic, and type in Ozark chestnut, and you won't believe what you read. So we went from a tree that no one has heard about, and they're all gone, to getting not just national, but worldwide attention on what we're doing. And it's a good thing. And when I wrote that, I haven't even updated this thing. I first put this on there when he was 93 years old. And I think we may need to adjust the screen just a little bit. And so anyhow, so as I began to look and research a little bit, I thought, well, based on what I know about history and science, I used to teach history and science. I don't know if the kids learn anything or not, but I taught it. And so the more I learned, though, about history and science, you realize it's very rare for a disease or pathogen to kill 100% of anything. And if we were all, everybody in here were hybrid corn, guess what? If we had disease that killed you, it would kill you, it would kill you, it would kill everybody in the room. But that's not what happens in the natural world. We're all different. And so if we are all different genetic makeup, then it may make you sick. You may not be affected. You may actually die from it. You'll be a widower. And so, yeah. So that's the way it works in the real world. So it's very rare for a disease or pathogen to kill 100% of anything. It's not the norm. It's just not the norm. So anyhow, this tree, the Ozark Chinquapin, and by the way, that word Chinquapin is an Algonquin Indian word. It's not an Osage word. And it translates into little tasty chestnut. And so in the eastern U.S., people are used to a Chinquapin bush, and here we have a Chinquapin tree. So I began to study on this and try to learn a little bit more. And the more I began to read and research on this, the more I began to find new information. And so he said they were so plentiful, you can scoop them up with a flat blade shovel and load them into wagons. And you're more dependable than a crop of corn. And so we've got a researcher here in the room, AJ Hendershot, where are you at? Right here. Okay, right in the very back. I was telling this to AJ years ago, and it was like I was talking to a wall with people. AJ never heard of it, and he said, give me the names of these people you've talked to and all. And all of them were real old people. AJ went back, and he was so inspired. He got kind of hooked on this same thing too. Here he is today, setting things up, doing presentations. So he actually drew a picture based on this about scooping them up, and he entered this into the art contest, and Cape Girardeau won first place. So congratulations, he's multi-talented. So I began to interview all kinds of people. And this is from a gentleman that's on our board, and he's a Cherokee descendant. And the blight will reach Oklahoma a little bit later. He told me, he said, I remember them trees growing up. They weren't very big. You got to remember, this is second growth. Everything had been logged over. And he said, you know, I'd walk in the woods with my bare feet, And he said, boy, would it hurt, but they were the sweetest nut you ever did eat. And I'm just telling you the way he said it to me. And he said, I remember back in 1963, there was a tree just loaded them Chinquapins, and they grew on a hillside and down a gully on a creek bank. They just grew all over the place. And the largest one I ever saw was 7 to 9 inches. And he said, before I die, I would like to see one of these trees. He was telling me this on the phone. He said, but I don't think I ever will. Well, guess what? After I got some nuts, I sent him some grow tubes. He went out with his children in Oklahoma, and they planted them. And one of our 15 research test plots now is on the Cherokee Nation lands. And so that's a neat thing. And so what happened to the tree? Well, you have to go back and look at what happened to the American chestnut. And so the chestnut blight, Cryphonectria parasitica, was brought over from Asia. We think on Japanese trees, and we think it could have been around a little bit longer. It was first noticed at the Bronx Zoo. It's pretty well what everybody thinks when it's first noticed. And they estimate around 4 billion American chestnut trees were killed with this blight. It was tried to stop, or they tried to stop it. They actually cleared out large areas of forest, but they didn't understand how this worked. And it just moved across the U.S. By the 1940s, it will be in Alabama, and it'll already be in Georgia. And as early as 1922, where's Chris White at? Chris White did some research and found an article in the Arkansas paper. It says 1922 there's a ban on any Chinquapins or chestnuts coming into Arkansas because it had already been found by 1922 in Nebraska and in Iowa. So the spread of it is kind of sporadic, and we are the people that spread it. We're the ones that did this. And so you went from a large tree like this, and this is a dead one. This is in northern Arkansas near the border to Missouri. And what you see is you go from a large tree to shrub-like status, and they're an understory, and there's very little pollination and very little nut production. So there's still some left, and some people say, well, it's extinct. Well, it's not really extinct. You can call that functionally extinct. And I'm going to give you an example. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're going to put this on the federally endangered list, and they were going to do that with the butternut tree. But they looked around and they said, well, you know, there's sprouts growing everywhere. And that's a dangerous thinking. And the reason for that, imagine all of us in the United States, over 300 million people, imagine some kind of disease came along and it killed everyone in the country, and our population dropped to a few thousand, and you would only live to be about 6 or 8 years old, you would die. And people will say, well, you know, the United States is still a great country. There's thousands of people there, but they're only 6 to 8 years old. So this kind of thinking is kind of dangerous because it's functionally extinct. It is not able to reproduce. We've lost the seed base, and so we would cease as a country to be powerful. And so think about that to kind of put it in perspective. Okay, so I began to work with Larry over here. I called him back in about 2005. And he was the first person I talked to that was really interested in trying to save this tree as well. And so, long story short, we went to this gentleman's place, and we found, I found out after talking to Larry that these trees were no longer there, that a tornado came and had taken them, taken this one other one right behind it and blown this one down, and then they cut the tree down, but the stump snapped back up in place. But Larry got seed from them, and we have those growing on research test plots today. And so this was a national champion, so I was on a hunt trying to find these trees. And I looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of stump sprouts that never made it much beyond the diameter of your forearm. And so we people in forest management, and I know we got several in here, we do prescribe burns. And at one time this tree was very fire loving, and we try to replicate natural processes of what the Native Americans did. We do burning. But for the Ozark Chinquapin today, if you have a stump and with this dead wood in immediate proximity to sprouts, there's mortality on some of them when you have a fire. It will sit for days, it will smolder them. And we've got places like Big Sugar State Park in Missouri, where we see that we have been losing more and more of those because of that. So the range of them continues to shrink, and the evidence of them continues to shrink. And logging practices, and even today, the land is so dissected that I was looking at a thing that we had on bears. We collared in Missouri, and it's like a video game. You'd watch them move through Missouri, they'd hit Interstate 44, ping, they'd come back. So the way we have our land dissected today, because of development, highways, it slows movement or spread of genetics from animals, and not so much birds, and they can fly, but plants especially. And so in the natural world, what I'm about to show you would be kind of hard to happen, and we've accelerated. So here's an Ozark Chinquapin. This one has been laying in the woods since it died in the 40s or 50s, and here's some leaves. You can see how eaten up they are by the invasive Asiatic weevil. And so we've changed the forest quite a bit. We've cut down a lot of forest land. We burned it, and the land has been battered pretty bad. And in the state of Missouri, we held the record of the highest loss of soil, if I'm not mistaken, AJ, in the country, and we turned that around. So logging was a big thing. And in Grandin, Missouri, a little town near Hunter, Missouri, we have had one of the largest sawmills in the entire world. So logging was a big thing. Along with it, they cut everything. And some pictures you look at, it's like a sea of stumps. Everything was cut away. And any little postage stamp piece of ground, of virgin timber, that was not cut over is extremely rare and far between. And so along with this, we lost the seed base of the Ozark Chinquapin. So you have the disease come in, and then as well as our land usage. So I began to go back and look at old maps. It's hard in old tree book maps to find the range, but I began to see them, and I started reading some things that were kind of unique to me. If you go back before the 20s, they just called them Chinquapins, and you can see this is the oldest range map I found. This is in 1907. And on our website, we've got page numbers and documentation, but for some reason, they would all say when you cross the Mississippi River, for some reason, the trees have an aspiration and they grow a lot larger. So the historic range, if you look at it, this is just a chronology of old maps. More contemporary ones don't show much. You get back, back in the 50s and 60s, tree books show Alabama. Then you get back in the 40s, they'll show a lot larger range until you finally get to like 1907 to show you. And so we've got some records. 1879, they're talking about a rock chestnut that was growing in southeast Missouri in the Ozarks. And if you look at pollen samples, you'll see that the castanea pollen is all over the eastern U.S. In fact, this splits Nebraska and Kansas. And prevailing winds usually blow west to east. And we've got some places like Chinquapin. We've got evidence of castanea pollen there. It's real hard to tell when you look at it whether it's American chestnut or whether it's Chinese Melissima. It's hard to tell. So how important was this tree? It was real important. The Cherokees actually called it the bread tree. It's real important for wildlife and had a profound effect on species. And everybody that looks at these leaves right here, and I'll just ask our friends from New York, what are you looking at? What leaves are these?
Some kind of chestnut.
What now?
Some kind of chestnut.
Some kind of chestnut? Looks like American, doesn't it? And John, you're here. What does it look like? John Doherty, is he here?
Looks like American.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay. So it looks like American chestnut, doesn't it? This is Ozark Chinquapin. And we did not naturally have any American chestnuts occur in the Missouri Ozarks or North Arkansas, but they've been planted since 30s and 40s. We run into that as well too, though. So, and some of the settlers in the 1840s and 50s planted them in different places. Steinmark, remember seeing them that were growing American chestnuts, but they were dying of the blight in the mid-40s. World War II was going on. So, a real important food source for people and wildlife is consistent nut crop every year, high protein food for wildlife and humans, real large nut crops. And it's just amazing the number of nuts we get. We've counted last year nuts on the trees. We had one tree that we got, we actually thought it was a little under 4,000 nuts. It wound up being closer to 6,000 once we started looking at trail cameras and looking at what the wildlife was actually eating. And then grew on real rocky, churny, dry soil, very drought tolerant. Blooms late May, early June after the frost, and the wood is real rock resistant. In fact, Sandra Anagnosticus, I like that picture of you standing up over that American chestnut and your little girl. It was in like a pasture in Connecticut, wasn't it? And that was from before World War I, is that correct? And still laying there today, I guess nobody's burned it, I hope. Okay, so extremely rot resistant wood. This is what we lost. And produces nuts in 3 to 5 years. American chestnut takes a little bit longer, 7 to 10 years roughly. A dominant species on places where it occurred. We had one gentleman here that was telling us that where he was at in Missouri, he's works in timber, and he's also the person that brought the elk over for us for NBC. He told me on his parents' property, there were places where about 40% of the canopy was actually Ozark Chinquapin. And so here's an old log. This is from Oregon County, and it's 101 degrees. This has not been photoshopped right here, by the way. And this tree is gone now. They had a wildfire and actually burned it up. So when we have fire, it burns up proof of those trees actually being there. And so anyhow, I started thinking, so why is it that there aren't any of these trees? Did any of them survive the blight? And I had tree book authors and experts told me that I was actually wasting my time trying to do this, and I was on a ghost time. And I was told that by a tree book author when I was going to Alabama. She was telling me, I hate to disappoint you, but I've been to every county in Alabama, and they're not here. She said, I've heard old timers talk about it, and she said, they're not here. Well, listen to what they said, and this is not about trying to disprove what someone has. This is about the fact that what I know now and what all of you know, at one time we did not know it. And so information is powerful. And we have new tools now of measuring things and learning, like LIDAR and that sort of thing, that can change what we before accepted as fact in history and science. So kind of keep an open mind to those things. So with new tools we have, like molecular studies, it's opening doors on what we thought was a fact before has actually been changed. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to pick on anyone, I'm just saying this is what I was told by experts on. So found the first tree back, I guess that's about 2006, and then and down with Larry we found that other one. And this is in a burn area, and I wish I had a little bit better area. The Chinquapins grow so fast they heal, and there's scars on all kinds of trees through here, but this one healed over very quickly. And so this was a tree in Alabama. This is in Calhoun County. And this one is on a guy's property he didn't know he even had down in southern Missouri. And this was our state champion tree for just about 2 months. We never got an award on it because other people found a bigger one. And here's Shane with a tree, and this one had real good genetics. It had been chopped on and cut on. We were going there to get pollen from it, and we were in an auto accident. So we never got pollen from it. Here's one in Oregon County, and here's another one close to where we're at right now today. And here's Chris White from his tree from years ago. And another one, you can see they have smooth apple-like bark. And this gentleman here worked for 34 years in Mississippi. And if I remember correctly, he had found 17 state champion Ozark Chinquapin trees. And so we've got different counties in Mississippi that we've got to add. And this is in a breeding program too. Here's another large tree in Missouri. And here's an even larger one. And here's one in East Texas. And here's, this would be northwest Arkansas. Whenever we find one of these trees, we've all got big smiles on our face. You know, it's like you found the best geocache in the world, or you found a pot of gold. It's a neat thing that's hard to describe. Larry, I think you missed it. Ask everybody who had ever found an Ozark Chinquapin, and he would be one that's a large one, though. So. And just more and more trees is just, you know, a great thing. So our goal, and I think AJ, I loaded the wrong one on here. Yeah, it's okay. No, it's okay. I'll try to put that up a little bit later. But anyhow, our goal is we're a group of outdoors men and women, and we've embraced science and technology and boots on the ground. And our goal is to restore the Ozark Chinquapin back to its native range, 100% pure. And we're working to establish a viable seed base through research and cross-pollination surviving trees, and to produce Chinquapin that's blight resistant, and seed will be available to anyone who wants to help restore them back to their native range. And so we've got a recovery action plan. I've got a long version of it, and that I've tweaked, so I went back to the basics. We're finding surviving trees, and we're collecting seed and pollen and grafts from them. We're preserving the genetics, and we're cross-pollinating surviving trees. And by the way, we're finding that the further apart these surviving trees are, the better the resistance the trees have. And it's kind of a neat thing, and we've observed things in the field, and now we're seeing in the lab that kind of backs up what we've been seeing. We inoculate the finished crosses with blight, and Leslie's going to tell a little bit about that a little bit later on here. And so we've been working with science and genetics and hypovirulence, raising public awareness, that's a big one, and trying to raise money for the projects, and everybody in here in this room has helped with that. You know, if you give your time or $30 or whatever you do, it goes directly to save the trees. There's no administrative cost. I don't have a salary. You know, we've all deeply focused on what we're doing, and we are extremely resourceful with our money and what we do with it. Dedicated locations in and out of the range, and seed available to the public for reintroduction. And so this is Pioneer Forest land right here, and this small tree, when this picture was made, is pretty good size. And Andy, you saw that a couple of years ago. It's even a lot bigger now. It just keeps going. And so we've had public meetings. The first one we had was in Harrison. And I'm glad to say a lot of these folks you see in the picture are still working on this today, though. And so this is Hobbs State Park. And Sandra, I think you were in that picture too, I believe. There we go. And so a lot of us have got a few gray hairs over the years working on this, but you know, it's something that's good that we can all be proud of, and it's something we can leave our wildlife and our children to inherit. And this is a great project. And by the way, these are some of my students I had that I taught school. They were great about coming out and helping clear property to plant trees. And you can't put a value on something like that, that kind of dedication. So we've been doing, working with schools and universities, and you know, to plant trees. In the old days, we went up on ladders, and Shane, where you at? I remember Shane looking down from a harness way up in a tree on a branch, not much bigger than my arm, and he said, "Steve, if you pull the rope tighter or give me slack, I'm falling out of here, and you're going to have to take me to the emergency room." And we were pollinating trees. So we've come a long ways with that. So it's been a good thing. So what have we learned about all this? Well, with laboratory and field discoveries, we've learned a lot of new things. We know that HA made this map of the blight spread, and we know that at least in northwest Arkansas, it made it there in 1957. And Fred Paillet did a lot of really good research on that, and hopefully we'll have some time he can share some of that with us. But what we're discovered that's not on this map is there's more places up in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and I've got my first seed last week from counties in Georgia, and we have some that they thought they weren't sure what they were in Tennessee, and they think that looks like, no final word, but it is Ozark Chinquapins too. They grow really fast. It's a 2-year-old tree that produced pollen on one of our third research spots we established back in 2007. And some of the pests that these trees have had to deal with, in addition to the blight, you know, because of proliferation of trade and travel, there's a lot more diseases and pathogens coming along. And our approach is to develop a tree that coexists with the blight. And folks, I guarantee you there's going to be other insects, diseases, and pathogens come along. And the trees that we've got, they're survivors. You know, you can say we've been working on this 15 years. let me tell you what, those trees for about 80 years have been surviving blight and insects like the invasive Asiatic oak weevil that just destroy the leaves, and they've survived from that, and these trees have been making seed. And in heavily blighted forest conditions, those are the ones we go to. Part of our lab has been in the woods where nature's been showing us which ones to go to. We just have to find them and then cross-pollinate them, sometimes hundreds of miles. And so we're accelerating a process that would take hundreds or thousands of years in nature. So neotropical birds, I was out with Steve Mallory, and we were going to one of the plots, and they were noticing neotropical birds going from one Chinquapin to the other one. And what they were doing, they were gleaning these insects that were eating the leaves off of them. And I got to noticing that higher up in the canopy, it's not that big of a problem, because that's where a lot of these birds, like this northern parula, actually hang out and collect insects though. So you bring back a new species, it helps wildlife populations, and it helps preserve our native ecosystems that we have, and it's a good thing. It's just a win-win thing. So this is pollination work. We tried to pollinate trees same way you did the American chestnut. It does not work. American chestnut on the very end of the branches is where they will have the nuts at. And we tried to do it further back on ours. It took us 3 years to perfect this, but you will inkill the branch if you try to do an Ozark Chinquapin that way. So we tweaked out our methods and learned quite a bit. And it's been a huge learning experience. And so contrary to what a lot of people think, some of these trees, if you have the right genetics and lots of pollen, you will get some surprises. And this is not an American chestnut you're looking at. This is an Ozark Chinquapin from crosses that we've been doing where we would get only one nut, and where we have lots of pollen. Sometimes we're getting 3, 4, and 5 nuts per burr. And it's amazing. Chinquapin means 1 nut per burr. And so our breeding program and the genetics that we've done, we found out some pretty interesting things. And so some of these same trees that we're getting 1 nut per burr, with a cross-pollination, not only do they have better blight resistance, but some of them, we've weaned some of our program, are actually more productive than what they would have been, just on their own in the wild. So lots of surprises. Here's a 3-year-old tree, and this is in Pioneer Forest, and you can see how tall this thing grew. And this is not the best place for it to be at. And Steve Mallory, you went out with me to see that tree with your group, and it's a pretty good sized tree now. To give you an idea how productive they can be, if you look at old limbs from them, you'll see recurved limbs, and that's as a result of so many nuts on these trees. They're like an overloaded apple tree. You're trying to see that limb to recurve and come back up. This particular branch had 47 nuts on the end of a branch, 47. And these are all single nuts on every one of them. So turkeys love them. They're good to eat. And even when they make several of them, there's like a split of a nut that size. And even grouse can eat them, and other birds can eat them, not just turkeys. And we've got some places where they're actually trying to repopulate back, and I've noticed right across the board, you'll see maybe 10 of them making it, and out of that, as the blight comes on them again in waves, you'll see less and less of them, but we still have some that are making it though, in places where, we had a place in Arkansas and one here in Missouri where that's going on. We found out if you don't put a grow tube on them, you will lose them. The deer do just what they do, and they will get in there and they'll actually eat these trees, so we have to put a grow tube on them. And I thank Larry Burford over here for first telling me that. I didn't have to reinvent the wheels, so that saved me a lot of time, a lot of heartache. We've done all kinds of studies on them, and if you look at the protein and the carbohydrates, they're way, way above everything else in the forest. And I had people say, well, where'd you get these numbers from the American Chestnut Foundation? Well, I called the then president of the American Chestnut Foundation, and Fred Hebard, and the president told me, well, you need to talk to, Professor Fulbright in Michigan. He said, I like round numbers, 5 to 8% protein for American chestnut, 43 for the carbs, 3 to 5 on proteins and fat. And this is what we got back from SGS Labs. And these other numbers here are what you see in forestry books today, though. So no wonder everything's going after the nuts. They're a potent little pill, and they're good to eat. And Chris, I think we've got some for people to try a little bit later on. Is that right? Okay. So I don't want to put anybody into a coma, but we've had DNA work done. There's a study done in 1999, and they published it in 2000. And to their surprise, they actually put a number on this. The least genetic diversity was the American chestnut. Of course, the greater that they checked would be some of the varieties you have in China. But the Ozark Chinquapin, though, surprisingly, was between the American chestnut on the low end and then the Chinese on the upper end. And so we keep having more and more tests that prove this same thing. And so, you know, if you look at all the information we have, this is from another DNA study, and all of them are showing that the Ozark Chinquapin is more uniquely diverse, and it is not related, as the books say, to Pomelo, the Allegheny. It's not a spur from it. It's actually more diverse, and we've got a molecular study I was hoping we'd have done at this meeting, but it will show us a little bit more, it dives deeper into the genome, and will give us even more information now. So deer love them, you know, all kinds of wildlife love them. I had to change the discriminator because I was getting videos of mice, chipmunks, and squirrels coming on the plots, and I don't know if you ever sit down and looked at thousands of pictures of mice and deer and squirrels. You want the deer pictures, but so I had to change the discriminator to raccoon size and up. And so I used to get, this is one of our plots right behind us. I used to have pictures now and then of turkey, but once these things started making the nuts, now we're getting flocks of them coming in. And so how these trees do, that got cut off on the bottom right here. So how they do in extreme drought. And the trees are out there today that we're finding have had everything Mother Nature has thrown at them. Not just what we've been doing on logging, and I've been with loggers before, and I know how it is. You know, you want the pines, you want the white oaks, and then so when somebody's building a housing development, they don't think about what's there. So you take that, and then you take the disease, and then you take all the other pathogens, and then now we have invasive plants. You take autumn olive, you have bush honeysuckle, so it's a battle out there for them. They're surviving. So how they do, though, with extreme drought and heat, and this is from, I think, August of 2012, and we had conditions in Missouri and Arkansas and Oklahoma that were real similar, actually drier than what you'd have out west. If any of y'all hear of fault fires out west. So what they do? Well, they couldn't pack up and run. That didn't happen. So here's one of our first crosses we made, and this is the shaded side, and it is 121 degrees where that thermometer topped out at. In the woods, it was 104 degrees that day. And this tree is one of our first crosses we produced, and you can see how everything is burned up. And these things have had very little care, and they've made it on their own, real harsh conditions. And so this is an old picture of some of the plots, and I think that is, Shane, is that it? You up there? I think, okay. It's pretty scary. There's you can see down below some of the things we've done. We've literally been out on a limb doing this work. And so we've done all kinds of work. We got USD approval for hypovirulence. Sandra has been good enough to ship some to us. She has great expertise in that. But it's not the whole answer. And Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people think like what they did in Italy where they can inoculate every European chestnut with a blight. We can't do that here, correct?
It's complicated.
It is very complicated. She told me at one time there was dozens, if not maybe more than 100 different strains of Cryphonectria parasitica, chestnut blight. But we experiment with that too, though. And so Leslie's going to show you a little bit later on, thanks to Andy Newhouse back here in the back, who's getting an award today, the first time we've ever done a plaque in the shape of New York. And he'll tell you a little bit later on about that, and Leslie will too. But we're fast forwarding what we're doing, and actually it says 7 to 10 days. Now in 5 days we can find out which of our trees is a good predictor of blight resistance, and it goes back to what we're seeing in the wild too. And this is a view from a lift bucket truck that was made doable by our good friends from Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation, donations they gave us out of their pocket, and it allowed us to afford these lift bucket trucks so we could pick it up to a bigger scale. And it's just everybody pitching in with different talents and skills and resources they have to put us where we're at today. And we've written a lot of letters. I hate mailing packages, but we've sent out seed all over the place. We've sent them to overseas, and I think we're up to about 35 states here in the United States. And so it's been a good thing. We've been giving awards out for people that go above and beyond to save and restore the trees, and it's an absolute pleasure to me to be able to do that. And we've been doing things for outreach and public education. And so here's a basket. That's what it's all about. Those are Chinquapin nuts in it. And so that's a neat thing. And so this is me. This is actually a bear den. And I was invited to go there because wildlife like bears, they can eat a variety of food, but they're most dependent on the nut crop. They mate in late spring, but it's kind of unusual in the animal world. The embryo or the fetus will not sit to the wall of the uterus. They're waiting to see if there's a nut crop. And by mid-November, if there's not a big crop of nuts in Missouri, Arkansas, guess what? She will abort all the fetuses. But if there's a big crop of nuts, then she can have, 1 to 5 babies. And so where this tree was at and where the American chestnut was at, it had a significant impact on wildlife populations. And so it's something that we're doing, like I said, that we can leave for our children and wildlife to inherit. And there's my son, he's 4 years old with a big cluster of them. And by the way, this cluster was from in a real remote place, and there's 2 trees side by side. This is Big Sugar State Park. And when I opened up that biggest one, I thought, that's the biggest bird I've ever seen. There's got to be the biggest Chinquapin nut I've ever seen there. Guess what? There was 3 Chinquapin nuts in that bird. And so that's our program that I did, and I'll try to answer any questions, and hopefully we're a little bit caught up. And AJ, you care to clip the lights back on that? I gave y'all quite a bit. If there's any questions, I'll try to hand this to you. Okay, we got one right here. I'll just give it to you.